Hello, my name is Keoki Malloy, and you can just refer to me as Keoki. I'm not a professor. Even though I am a professor, you don't have to call me professor. I'd like to welcome you to WST100 for the summer semester of 2025. Originally, this class was going to be taught by my colleague Donna Thompson, but something came up a couple weeks before the semester was supposed to start, and she asked if I would graciously accept the course, and I am, and I'm very happy to do so. Just so you know a little bit about me, so you know why I am qualified to teach this content to you. I have been teaching this class since the spring semester of 2015, so this marks, I think, my 24th or 25th semester of teaching women's studies at Chandler Community College, so it's not new to me. So you can feel assured that I'm giving you information that's accurate and that I am qualified. And what makes me qualified is I have a master's in women's and gender studies, as well as a master's in psychology. So I know about what I'm talking about. And I'm also an alum of this fine college, Chandler Community College. I attended the first semester they opened in the fall of '87. And I graduated from Chandler Community College in the fall of '89. And some of you may say, wait a second, it wasn't a community college until 1992, so how did he graduate from there? That is correct. My degree is actually from Mesa Community College, and it was at that time in '87 through '92, Chandler was actually considered Chandler Community College, an extension campus of Mesa Community College. So that's how that happened. I went on to Arizona State University. No, that's my master's. Let me go on. Back up a little bit. I went on to Northern Arizona University and I got a bachelor's degree there. And then I took a gap year that lasted for 20 years. And in 2011, I started a master's program at Arizona State University to learn to get a degree in master's in women's and gender studies. Okay, so just wanted to let you know that information so you can say, oh yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Okay, anyway, this class, the way I structure it, I have it more of a discussion-based course, and because it's online, that discussion will happen in the discussion boards. And what will happen is you will look up the reading content on your own, and then you will use my lecture as a kind of like a filler to kind of piece the pieces together for you so that you can actually talk intelligently or whatever, address intelligently the discussion prompt in this class. So the reason why I do this is because I want to keep the textbooks to 0. And so I use what they call the Open Educational Resources, or often referred to as OER. And that way you don't have to pay for any textbooks or a physical book. And especially if it's an online course, it doesn't make sense to have you drive to the bookstore or even just go online and purchase a physical book when there's no need to do so. So just so you understand, each week, and we have 2 weeks of lessons each week because this is an 8-week class, you still get 16 weeks of content in an 8-week course. So each week this semester or this summer, there will be 2 topics that are going to be discussed, and you will have to go online somewhere like just say Google search or whatever you want to do and find an academic source for that topic and find out what you can know about it, learn about it, okay? And then if you want, you can read my lecture or watch my lecture and then post your discussion prompt or your discussion to the first prompt. And then you will have to respond to 2 of your classmates. There will be a brief quiz at the end of the module after you've done your discussion posts to just kind of like check your learning. They're going to only be 5 points each. They're not huge amount of number, or they're not a large number. It's not a large number of points. However, if you choose to miss 8 of those quizzes, that's going to be 40 points, which means you will probably end up with a D in the class because this is a 100-point class, okay? So even though they're 5 points, it's not going to be a good idea to just skip them, okay? All right. that's enough about me and what we're doing this semester. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put that into an email to me through the campus classroom via the email inbox function. Let's go on with the brief lecture for this week, which will be Seneca Falls Seneca Falls and Waves of Feminism. It's like, what is my lecture? Sorry, Seneca Falls and Waves of Feminism. We always start in this class at the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. The reason why we start there is because that is pretty much the beginning of women's rights movement. It was in Seneca Falls, New York, July 19th and 20th of 1848. And just to caveat, I am not good at math. That is one of the reasons why my master's is in arts and not a science, because it's not math heavy. So if I say anything about that was so many number of years ago and my math is off, please forgive me. I'm not great at math, especially when I'm on the fly like this. But just know I know the information, okay? I'm not good with numbers in that regard. So in 1848, there was this conference they call it a convention. I always call it a conference. It's actually a convention that was where women have decided they've had enough, that they were tired of being second-class citizens. They were tired of not having equal rights to men. And so they gathered this convention in Seneca Falls, New York. What I want you to know about that is there's a thing called declarations and sentiments that was the basis or the key focus of that weekend. And the main the main presenter or speaker of that conference was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She kind of modeled her declaration sentiments after the Declaration of Independence, which basically we say, the Declaration of Independence states that we want to have a more perfect union, freedom for people, right to be free to have whatever they want. So she wanted to also say that if we are supposed to be a free nation, then why do women not have the same rights as men? And so she asked for those rights. One of the things that she really wanted was the right to vote. And this was 1848. And as we know, our history didn't happen until 1920. So that's about 72 years, I think. 72 years from asking for it to getting it. Just think about that, okay? So it was a long fight. A lot of women in that time frame fought for that right to be able to vote. And once we got that right to vote, women got that right to vote, they excluded some women. They excluded women of color. So in 1920 to 1964, when they had to pass the Civil Rights Act, that was still an additional 40-something years that not all women were able to vote. So just think about that. So from 1848 to 1964, 115 years or so, where not all women had the right to vote. We now have that right. And so I want you to know, because most of you probably had that right your entire life. And it's important to know your history so that you can say, no, that's not going to happen again. We're not going to allow you to do that to us, because in 1848 you tried and it didn't work. Okay? The other thing they wanted to do is they wanted to have the right to get an education. Yes, they were going to school, but being able to go to college was not afforded to all women. If you were rich and could pay for it, you could go. So they said, we want to be able to go to college as well, okay? And so they fought for that, and eventually, I think by the 1920s, I want to say, or right around there, women were finally able to go to college. There wasn't restrictions on that. They were able to apply and get admitted to a college or university. They also did not have the right to own property in their own name, and they wanted to do that. They couldn't hold a bank account or credit cards in their own name. And this statistic is going to be very staggering for you. It wasn't until 1974 that women were able to have a credit card or a checking account without having to have their husband's name on that account. So just think about that. That is not that long ago, ladies and gentlemen. 1974 was approximately 50 years ago. So it's only been 50 years in this country that we've allowed women to have a credit card or a checking account solely in their name. One other thing that happened at the Seneca Falls conference or convention is a lady by the name of Sojourner Truth spoke. She was a woman who was born into slavery in the South. She was able to move or make her way to the North, and she attended that conference because she was working in the fields right next to her male counterparts. Yet she didn't get paid equally. We still have that problem today. Isn't that amazing? She wasn't getting paid equally. And she went to that conference and she gave an excellent speech called Ain't I Woman? Now, because they didn't have the ability to record conference speakers or anything like that, no one wrote it down. It's just been transcribed or translated basically by word of mouth or what people remembered her saying. So if you look up and you Google search Sojourner Truth, and that's Sojourner, I'll repeat it again if you're writing it down, Sojourner, Truth, Truth. It's just exactly like you to speak the truth, not to lie, okay? Sojourner Truth. And if you look up her lecture or her speech anywhere online, you'll have different versions of it. But the one thing that's always remained constant was that she said, Ain't I Woman, multiple times in reference to the fact that you don't have a problem with her working right next to a man, digging ditches or little holes and stuff to plant the crops. So there's heavy labor that was involved. And if she was a woman and not equal to her male counterparts, then why was she equal enough to dig those holes and plow those yards and stuff like that and work out their heavy labor in the field? So her argument was, if I'm not equal to the man, then how come you have me doing equal work in the field, equal labor work? And that's where she's like, ain't I woman? So she's saying, am I not a woman? Yes, you are a woman. So if you recognize that I am a woman, but you don't have a problem with me doing work that's what a man is doing. And because you don't have a problem with me doing the work that a man is doing, why aren't you giving me the same equal rights as a man and paying me the same thing and giving me those same benefits as the man is receiving? So it's a very powerful speech that came from a black woman in Seneca Falls in 1848. That's also believed to be the beginning of the first wave of feminism. There are 3 waves of feminism, and the first one is the longest. It goes from 1848 to about 1960. Now, if you look up also through some sort of internet search, you'll find different dates, but they're all within 5 or 10 years of one another. That's because it's not like we stop something and we start it the next day. It's not like we have a class that ends in 2025 and then it begins again. Another class begins in 2000, another month later that month or later that year in 2025. So there's no definitive date. Something happened, something major happened that sparked a movement, so to speak, that kind of said, you know what, we're moving in a different direction. So hence how a new wave is formed. So when I give you these dates, just know that's the dates that I was taught in graduate school, and those are the dates that I'm using, but they may be different in your internet search. So the first wave of feminism, like I said, is 1848 to approximately 1960. It is the longest movement because for so long, women were not equal to men, and didn't have those rights and privileges that the men have. So I want you to understand that since that Seneca Falls Convention, there were the same things they've been asking for. They just kept asking for the right to vote, to be able to own property, to be able to have credit cards in our name. Those things were always happening. So the first wave is pretty much fighting for rights and asking for things and demanding different things and that type of nature, okay? So if we want to say the first wave is kind of like the raising awareness that there's an inequity and they're fighting for it. So as we move on into the second wave, how we got there is in the 1940s, early 1940s, there was that Second World War. And labor was short with men. So women had to go out and leave the house for the first time and work. And if you remember, right up until about 1960s, 1940s and 50s, even up to the 60s, what was the responsibility of women? Was to get married, have children, take care of the house, take care of the husband, take care of the children, do all those womanly things, right? They didn't work per se. They worked in the home. Yes, they weren't getting paid for it, but they were working in the home, not out of the house. So the latter part of that first wave, women started to move into the workforce. And what happened was they're starting to say, okay, we can do the same work that the men are doing. They're not here. We're doing it. So if we can do it, then why can't we continue to do it? And so after the war ended and the men came back, lots of companies try to say, okay, well, thank you very much, ladies, for helping us out while the men were away. You're no longer needed. If you'd like to go back home, that'd be great. Probably not exactly like that, but just to give you an idea. And like, hell no. We can do this job. We're not going back home. We're not leaving quietly. We're going to stay. And that's what happened. That's that shift or that spark, if you will, that happened. The movement that women are saying we're going to give up our traditional roles. We're no longer going to be called housewives. We want to be out of the house and working. So the second wave of feminism came in, and one of the things that came out of that was what they call the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. It was submitted in 1972, I believe. Sorry if I should. I taught so many years and I just can't remember dates. I have a mental block out remembering dates. I apologize for that. So they submitted an Equal Rights Amendment to change the Constitution to say that men and women are going to be equal in all ways. It passed Congress, but to change the Constitution, you need to have a 2/3 vote of the states. And because that was 50 states, I believe they needed 38 states to say, yes, we want women to be equal to men. And they gave them, the government, gave these states 10 years to ratify it, meaning to accept it. And by 1982, possibly 84, I can't remember if it was 72, 74, I'm so sorry, but just remember, it was early 70s and the mid to the early 80s, 10 years to ratify this movement of the ERA amendment. And we fell short by 4 states. We didn't get enough states to ratify it, so the ERA failed for lack of ratification. So to this day in 2025, there is nothing in the United States Constitution that dictates men should be equal to women. What got me, and I'm still amazed, is why do we need something in our Constitution to say that men and women must be equal when they're both human beings? Why do we have to have a law to tell us how we must treat people who are not of the same sex? That was always kind of my eye-opening moment when I was going through my women's studies master's program. That was pretty amazing. Also, sexual reproductive rights came about. You might have heard Roe v. Wade before. If not, it's Roe versus Wade. It was a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court for women's rights to abortion. That was 1974. And that passed after about a 10-year fight in the courts to get the right to have an abortion. And that right was given to women across the entire country because it was a national court case, Supreme Court of the United States, the SCOTUS, right? It gave women the right to an abortion. And that was to say that they have a right to choose what they do with their own bodies, to have some sort of autonomy or agency about their own bodies and what they do with it. To this day, it's still a very much controversial topic. There are people who believe there should be no abortion, or if there is, it should be up to a certain number of weeks. And there are people who believe that there should be the right for women to choose. That's the pro-choice, pro-life argument that we have here. Not going to get more into that. Just want you to know how that came about. And I believe in 2020, President Trump overturned Roe v. Wade and gave that decision of abortion back to the states for the states to decide. So women lost the right to abortion across the country. And so now there are some states who say abortion is okay up to a certain amount of time. 6 weeks is a little too early. Some have 6 weeks, some have 15 weeks. But to not go beyond the point of viability. What that means that they cannot get to the point where the embryo can live outside the uterus and still survive. If it's at that point, you can no longer have an abortion. You must carry it to full term. There are arguments, though, that sometimes nature or science takes over and it could be dangerous for the child or the mother to survive. And the woman should have the right to terminate her abortion beyond that point of viability if there's going to be a problem with that child or that mother's life, possibly even leading up to death. And that's still the argument there. That's what they call late-term abortion. I think that's up to 22 weeks. So that's that 15 to 22 weeks, that's 7 weeks or so that they're arguing. But there are some states that don't provide it at all, and some states that provide it with some sort of limitation. And in the second wave of feminism, we start to talk and address, I'm sorry, reading my notes over to the right side, about domestic violence and marital rape. They also said, why is it that whenever there's a domestic disturbance or domestic violence, the woman has to prove that she didn't do anything wrong? Why is it that the man is always the one who is protected, so to speak, and woman has to prove that she didn't do anything? And what they're talking about is, did she wear inappropriate clothing? Was her skirt too short? Was her blouse cut too far down? Those types of things. And so they wanted to make domestic violence, when it's the person that you know, not as a crime. It had to become a crime for a woman to be able to press charges against her boyfriend, life partner, domestic partner, spouse, whatever that is. If they were to be violent against the woman, she had some rights to press charges. They didn't allow that until 1992. Okay? I kept it in the second wave of feminism because it was finalized by 92, but like I said, it started to happen sometime in the 70s with the ERA. And again, anything that changes or becomes a law takes a while, okay? So that started to happen in the second wave and finalized in 92, which crosses over into the third wave. Also, marital rape was part of that. And they said, just because that woman is your wife does not provide you the absolute authority or right over her. She's not your object of desire to do what you feel is necessary. Now, when I say women as an object, it's not necessarily sex object. We heard the word sex objects a lot, right? that someone is a site of desire based on what they look like and how sexually attractive they are. That's different from from being a woman of an object. Just think of it as an object is something you owned. Like, for example, I'm just looking at my water flask. So I might own a water flask. That's an object that I own, and I can do with it what I want. And that's how women were viewed for many years, that they were an object. They were something that's owned by a man. And they didn't want that either. They wanted to break free from that. And that's how they were. That's one of the ways they got their freedom, is to say, just because I'm married to that man does not give him the right to have sex with me if I don't choose to want or doesn't want to have sex that night or whatever. And if he does force me to have sex, I'm going to bring forth rape charges. Okay? So it's no different than someone that's not married to you forcing themselves on you. Okay? Now we're going to move into the third wave, which is 1990 to approximately 2012, 2015. Many scholars who study women's and gender studies claim that we're in the fourth wave of feminism, and I'll get back into that because I know this lecture is about the third wave, but I'm going to touch briefly about why they think we're in the fourth wave of feminism. When in the third wave, the focus went to shifting to more of our body and sexuality and positivity. Body positivity and sexuality, okay? It's about choices. If we can kind of describe the third wave of feminism in an adjective or a word, it's called choices. People or women wanted more choices. They wanted freedom to choose what they do with their body, freedom to choose how they wear, what jobs they have, what education they get. They wanted choices about what they do because they were limited with those things, okay? They were able to choose to have breast augmentation surgery and say, that's what I wanted because that makes me feel comfortable, but that doesn't mean that means that I am a sex object. There's that sex object thing. It doesn't say, I give you permission to treat my breast like a sex toy. It's something that I want and it's something I'm doing and I'm choosing to do. And those are the positive choices because, just face it, there are some women who naturally don't have breasts. They don't develop for some whatever reason. So they wanted to look more like a woman because our society is very focused on what it looks like in semiotics, meaning what do we see and how do we interpret that? And so that in the 1990s and beyond is more about body positivity, okay? And that they also said that the idea of beauty is not a size 0 or a 2. Beauty can be defined in sizes beyond size 0 and 2. A woman can be a size 24 and she still is beautiful. We are not going to allow society to say, starve yourself to death if you want to be beautiful, okay? And that's what happened in the 1990s and beyond into the 2000s. Sexual harassment laws were finally put in place. There's a landmark case that happened in Minnesota. I'm going to mess up this name, but I think I'll get it right. Taconite Steel and Company I believe it's 3M in Minnesota. They had, for the first time in the mid-70s, women working in the coal mines, and the men didn't want them there. So what did they do? They physically and emotionally and mentally harassed them to try to get them to quit their jobs. But the jobs were very well paying, and there's this one woman, the name escapes me right now, but it's not important. She wanted that job and needed that job because she was a single mother and needed to take care of her 3 children. And it paid handsomely so that she could take care of her 3 children. And they tried to force her out of there. And she was very instrumental in bringing forth a class action lawsuit. For those who may not know, a class action lawsuit is a lawsuit where there are multiple plaintiffs, at least 3. So she brought the employees, her co-workers who were working with her. They all filed this lawsuit against their employer that said they were being harassed here and we don't like it. We just want to be able to come to work and have a nice job and do our job without any sort of harassment. They were found guilty. The company was found guilty of harassing these women, sexually harassing them. There are some points in the movie that shows, in the movie North Country that stars Charlize Theron, it shows the things that they did to these women. They would write the C-U-N-T word in blood, like they took a tampon, and I don't know if it was real blood or ketchup or whatever, but they would write on the lockers, C-U-N-T. Or they would ejaculate on their clothes in their locker. And they'd come back from after working all day, and there'd be semen on their clothes. Things of that nature. Very, very bad things that they were doing to these women. And they were harassing them. And there was absolutely nothing these women could do to get these men to stop, because the laws didn't protect them. And the employer was male at the top, right? And so these men, who were also presidents and vice presidents of this company, they didn't want the women there. So even though these women were complaining that these men were doing that their co-workers were doing that to them, nothing changed. So the class action lawsuit changed that, and it made it a law. It amended the law that said, you cannot harass your employees at work. And if you do, there are going to be consequences of that. Did that mean sexual harassment stopped? Sexual harassment in the workplace? No. But if there is sexual harassment, now women have the right to be able to bring it forth legally and to get some sort of injunction and to get some sort of relief from that. So that's something that happened in the 1990s. I believe that was 1991, 92, somewhere around there. And more women of color were fighting for their equal rights as well. Gender pay gap was a major one. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in this semester. But that's one of the things. There's no pay equity for women of color. There's no there's health disparities and health inequities for women of color. But more women of color are coming forth, and they're going to stop these things from happening. Okay. The fourth wave of feminism, which most people believe we are actually in, that's right around, like, it picks up around 2012, what I said, to the current time, 2025. With the onset of internet and social media, more awareness can happen because of those platforms. The Me Too movement is a big one. Also, that meant the hashtag or the TikTok, I don't know what you call it, hashtag Me Too, right? I'm old, I don't know what that's called. I think it's called hashtag Me Too. That started to raise awareness about women who are being treated unfairly, gender pay gap, not being promoted because of sex or gender. And so those are the things that are coming about in the fourth wave. Women are taking to Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat, all these social medias, and posting their arguments and saying things like, I'm not going to let my employer do this to me, and ladies, come on, join with me, and let's post this too. And they're becoming very vocal with the use of social media. And I can't remember her name right now. I think it was Alyssa Milano. She's very big in the Me Too movement. She didn't start it, but she's a celebrity that took it and ran with it, okay? And she kind of made it very popular. The March on Washington that happened in 2017, that's when what they call the Million Woman March, but I don't think a million women went, but a large number of women went to March on Washington to protest all the inequities that are happening in women today in the workplace and in society. So many things are happening to this day that was a spark from the very first women's rights movement in 1848. Let me just check my notes to make sure I got everything here that I wanted to get for you. Oh, one more thing. Yes. And what happened was in the third wave, we forgot, FMLA. We're going to talk more about that. That's the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993 that brought forth maternity leave. Do a little bit of reading about maternity leave, but we're going to talk more about that at the end of the semester when we talk about moving forward or the future. But in 1993, with the FMLA, women got to have maternity leave. What that means is before 1993, if a woman was pregnant and had a baby, she couldn't take time off to go care for her child for up to 6 weeks or however long she wanted and come back to her job. She had to quit her job, and then when she's ready to come back, hope that her job was available, that she could come back to it. But she had to reapply for that job and be considered qualified and get rehired. FMLA was protections. It allowed the woman time off from work up to 12 weeks unpaid. Some companies will pay it, but it comes from their vacation and their sick time. It's not an actual extra benefit. They have to provide it because the United States law said so. But it allows them to place their job on hold, allows them to go away for however long, up to 12 weeks, and return and not have to reapply, not have to get rehired. They just kind of like go on an absence or a leave. Okay, so that's one of the things I want you to understand, that FMLA came about in 1993, and that was part of the second wave of the second wave. So women no longer had to plan when they're going to get pregnant and how they're going to do it, and do I stay home with my baby or do I continue working or whatever. They don't have that trauma or stress to deal with anymore. Taking to social media. Okay, those are all the things I wanted you to know about this first week of the semester when we talk about the Seneca Falls Convention and the waves of feminism. Go ahead and do the discussion posts and respond to your two of your classmates, and don't forget to take the quiz. And that's kind of how the semester will go each week. You will have those things to do. And if you do everything as according to the syllabus, there's a very good chance you will get an A in this class. Okay, and as always, every week, if you have any questions, I am here. Just because it's online does not mean I am disappeared. I am here for you every week, and I will see you online. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.